We
This meeting is being recorded.
cool.
Gonzaga University planted milkweed, and they've got a monarch showed up last week.
Really, very good.
That's the rumor I got.
Well, luckily tonight's speaker, even though it's not his primary purpose tonight, if anybody knows, it'll be him.
Yeah, I told him already.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get this ball rolling, I guess. My role tonight is to introduce David James and be moderator. But first, these commercial breaks. Reminders, we will meet at 7 o'clock on Friday, the 15th for registration. And it begins there. It'll be at the Lewis and Clark Trail State Park, group campsite number 2. And all you gotta do is look for butterfly nets, etc. And we'll make sure it's well marked. That means special opportunity there. That's where Carl Barentine works his moth magic. Come see what mothing is all about. If you've never done it, I've got my moth light and sheet and bucket and all that. It's kind of a interesting process, and I love it. I recommend it. So we had to think about that. And when Carl will do that, and then he'll present his findings in the morning. And you're welcome to stay up with him. So tonight's speaker, we have David James, born in the UK, moved to Australia. And luckily when he came to the US, we got him here at WSU Extension. I don't know how we were so fortunate. And I'm just worried that maybe one of these times David is going to realize there's more to life than WSU. Go Beavs. All right. They're both great institutions. David is known as Mr. Monarch, yeah, but also so much more with his work with the Coronas Fritillary, his checker spots, blues. Blues, what a wonderful topic. Let's go to the Blue Mountains. David scouted the area last weekend, and we're just curious, David, what you've got for us. Why don't you take it away?
Okay, thank you, Jim. Can you all hear me? I hope.
Yep.
There is a history of problems in my Zoom talks, so hopefully we'll get through this one without any problem. Yeah, so I'll share my screen. I scouted last Thursday and Friday, and although it was sunny everywhere else, the blues wasn't the case. It was sometimes sunny, but often not. So the conditions were suboptimal, really, for butterflies. Okay. So this is the preview. This slide here is actually a highlight, I think. Just let me. So one of the things that, well, we're guaranteed to see are pale swallowtails. Pale swallowtails were everywhere that I looked. I actually walked about 10 miles in various locations trying to find good spots, and pale swallowtails were everywhere. And one particular spot, which this is a shot of, sort of, is a hilltopping location. And there were about a dozen pale swallowtails doing their hilltopping thing there. I didn't spend a lot of time trying to get the perfect picture, but it wasn't too difficult to get. you know, a couple of swallowtails in the frame circling each other or going high in the sky. So, you know, if you've never seen hilltopping before, I think we can guarantee that. Although, of course, by the time we go, another week has elapsed, and maybe they won't be there. But so, yeah, I think we can almost guarantee seeing the pale swallowtail, even if they're not hilltopping, because they are abundant this year. And whatever problems the winter and the spring gave to other butterflies, it didn't happen for pale swallowtails. They survived very well. So I saw about 30 species, which is a bit more than I thought before I did the count. Well, I mean, go back to the spot. I was, you know, normally at this time in the Blue Mountains, you'd expect to see 40 species, maybe a bit more. But, you know, after I returned home and hadn't counted what I'd seen, I thought I'd probably only seen 25. So I was pleasantly surprised to see I'd seen 30. But there were a lot of things that were missing, mainly, well, because of the suboptimal weather, but also because like many locations in Washington this year, it's way behind, at least 2 or 3 weeks behind normal. So the week that passes from when I scouted to when we actually all turn up there could be very important in changing the picture, as I'm going to show tonight, of the butterflies that I saw. You know, especially as we're having a warm to hot week coming up, a lot more things may appear, hopefully. So the background is I did the 2-day scouting trip, suboptimal weather. The Blue Mountains landscape, we have been there a number of times now, and you know, I go back 20 years to routinely monitoring Blue Mountains locations, and it's changed a great deal in 20 years. It's a fire ravaged landscape now, and it's still recovering. I mean, there's been multiple fires in the last 20 years, and you know, none of them have been, you know, totally killed every tree, but there's many views like this where there's been a lot of destruction to trees caused by the fire, and it's, you know, the landscape is still regenerating. And so while butterflies are taking advantage of that, in some areas the regeneration hasn't been going long enough to actually, you know, reach climax butterfly populations. So expect to see a lot of fire damage. And the butterfly populations this year, as in all populations, butterfly populations I've seen this year in Washington, tend to be small. They are small there, and behind schedule by about 2 to 3 weeks. And I think the April freeze, I mean, in Yakima, we had 6 inches of snow in the middle of April that lingered, and worse than that, we had below freezing temperatures down to about 20 degrees, I think, in late April. So, you know, goodness knows what it was like in the Blue Mountains at that time as regards temperature. And I'm sure a lot of species had already woken up and maybe suffered a great deal from the unexpected freezing temperatures. And so I'm theorizing that, you know, this has caused reductions in the populations of some species. So the plan after my scouting trip, it all changed. You know, I thought on Saturday we'd go up to the Umatilla National Forest, since that was going to be the focus of the weekend, going right up to Diamond Peak and Mount Misery, where Great Basin fritillaries occur and a number of other, you know, species. But that really isn't a good idea because it's so far behind up at that high elevation. As an example, there are orange tips flying everywhere. That's basically all we're seeing up there, orange tips. There's no sign of fritillaries at all. And also a fire had been through there that I wasn't aware of, looks like last year or the year before, and the road to Diamond Peak is a bit very dodgy, to say the least, and I wouldn't want a caravan of vehicles going down there, and there's not much to see anyway, as I say. So instead, on Saturday, we will go down the Tucannon River Valley, which is a warmer location. It's lower, so it's still behind in in species phenology, but there's more to see there than there is at the high elevations. So we'll go down the valley, and I don't think Wobber's ever been down there. Maybe we have once, but not all the way to the end, and I plan to do that. So that day we'll drive a circuit of about 80 miles. We go down the valley and then come back a little way and go up in elevation on the southern side, I think it is, to the Skyline Drive, Kendall Skyline Drive. Some of you may know of that. Is actually an alternative route back to Dayton. So we'll be doing a circuit that day. And so we'll get a chance to see different faunas down on the valley and on the high elevation. There'll be fewer butterflies at high elevation, but you know, with this week of warm weather, some things I'm hoping will appear. And then Sunday morning, we'll go up to Umatilla National Forest, and I found one location fairly low down, Willow Spring Road, that has quite a few butterflies flying, and that's where the tiger swallowtail hilltopping location is. So, yeah, I think we can spend quite a bit of time there, and if there's time afterwards and people want to, we could go up to Mount Misery, which it's a lot better than it sounds. But I can understand why it is called Mount Misery, because often there are clouds up there. And so we won't go up there if there are clouds. But if there are no clouds, then it's quite, you know, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Great Basin Fritillary might have started emerging. So it would be worth checking out if anyone's interested at that point. So yeah, as I say, the cold late spring means that the upper areas, and I mean, you know, above 5,000 feet, they have very few butterflies flying, and really the flora is very spring-like. So the Tucannon River Valley, we need Discover passes for most of the locations there. So I know most of us have those. The first spot we might go to is this fishing pond, depending on how many people are there. When I went there was nobody, so Saturday morning might be a bit different, but it's a nice spot. Lots of swallowtails flying around, and there's opportunities for them to be mudding too. They weren't the day that I was there, but there were signs that they had been, because there's many wings on the floor where obviously a bird had taken advantage of the aggregation of swallowtails on the mud. But we can walk around the pond. I think we can go all the way around. And so that might be a good first stop. There's the wings I was talking about. And then we'll move further down the road, which increases in elevation a bit. I think the previous location was about, what was it, 2,000 feet. So we'll go another 1,000 feet up further down the road, some miles, excuse me, maybe 5 miles. And here, there's some hiking trails, which obviously we're not going on, but there are also places where horses are roosted, not roosted, they're not birds, are they? They're not even stabled either, because there's no stables, but horses are there, and there's dung there too, usually. There wasn't much when I was there the other day. But because of the dung, there's usually nettles. There are nettles there, and butterflies associated. This spot I was disappointed by, because last year, same time, this whole area, if you can see my cursor, was much more moist, and there were literally thousands of butterflies mudding, particularly or mostly snowberry checker spots. But this year, I just saw half a dozen snowberry checker spots. So, you know, when you get it was clearly a population explosion last year of snowberry checker spots, but and we usually expect a decline after an explosion, but boy, there's been a very big decline this year. I think they've been out for some while, because I saw some old ones. So that seems to be the population, a much lower population. But that's, as I say, the general principle across all species. Diversity is not too bad. Most species are present, but the populations are very low. Oh, and on the nettles, I found some caterpillars there. I wasn't even looking, actually, they were just obvious there. Milbert's tortoiseshell caterpillars. Shine that Milbert's tortoiseshell had been around. I did see a few of Milbert's. This is another location in that general area. So you can see fire has been through there again, but the recovery is more advanced in this area. And then the road finishes at a place called Meadow Creek, which is about 3,600 feet. And again, wasn't a great deal there, but the weather wasn't good when I got to Meadow Creek. So I expect we'd see more if the sun was shining. And so then after that, maybe after lunch, maybe we'll have lunch at Meadow Creek. We'll double back a couple of miles and head upwards to the Kendall Skyline Drive. And this takes us up to about 4,500 feet to begin with. And then we keep going up to about 6,000 at a maximum, I think. This meadow was one of the meadows I stopped at. And, you know, down in the Tocallan Valley, I hardly saw any blues at all. But at least there were some blues up here. But, you know, tellingly, all the blues that I saw appeared to be fresh. You know, they weren't warm. So again, and you can see here, maybe there's parsnip flowered buckwheat, another spring buckwheat, so that really just beginning to bloom. So, you know, there's a lot of spring flowers or mid-spring, late spring flowers that are just appearing. It gives you an indication of how far behind things are. But, you know, further down the Umatilla National Forest, when you first in, the first few areas that are often good for butterflies, they're actually a bit burnt out. So it's a very strange situation where the very lower areas with, you know, the midday sun, I guess, and had dried up, and the soils, of course, you know, are prone to drying. So, you know, just after the entrance, a lot of the buckwheats and such like have finished flowering. So, but you only have to go up, you know, a couple of thousand feet and things change remarkably. So that's Saturday. Sunday, we'll go up to Umatilla National Forest, and this is the entrance. It's about 4,500 feet at the entrance. And then we'll find Willow Spring Ridge or Road. I called it the Ridge because it is a ridge. It's about 5,200 feet. So not, you know, not a great deal difference from the entrance, but very different in terms of the plants that are flowering and the butterflies that are there too. It's a very fire ravaged landscape again. I don't know how long ago the fire went through here, but maybe 5 years or so. But again, there's a big meadow at the top that's very large and open, and the flowers are just, you know, in full bloom there basically. And we look down actually on the Tocallan Valley where we would have been the day before. Still recovering from the fire, as I say. So, you know, but it is good for butterflies because of the flowers and the recovery that's going on from the fire. It's just a little bit retarded again, like everywhere else, but it is better than all the other upper elevation areas that I saw. And the hill topping spot. So this is the hill topping spot. At the end of the road, there's a very grassy area, and then you walk through the grass and you come across this. And so this is where the swallowtails are hill topping on the top there. And curiously, they're the only species that I saw hill topping, obviously, anyway. I mean, there might have been others that weren't obvious, but the pale tiger swallowtails were very obvious, obviously. And there's the proof again, and there's two circling each other. And that's the look down from the hilltopping spot. So you can see it's pretty green and lush. You know, a lot of areas up there are green and lush. I mean, you know, but saying that though, in 1 week, you know, I'll be interested to see just how, you know, with the heat we're having this week, how quickly it will all dry out. So I'll run through the species I saw, and then I'll mention a few extra species, or actually it's more than a few, it's probably another 30 that I didn't see that we have potential for seeing. Because as I say, you know, the fauna up there is very diverse, and it's one of the reasons we chose the Blue Mountains, and we have done before, because you know the fauna is pretty good if you go at the right time. And as I said, the flora is exceptional above 5,000 feet. And we still get, you know, these are yellow lupins, usually senesce by now in July. They're June flowering, but you know, above 5,000 feet, they're still, you know, in good condition and not really senescing. So starting off with the swallowtails, already talked about this hilltopper extraordinaire. We're definitely going to see that species. And so these are the species I saw the other day, the western tiger swallowtail, also along the Tucannon River Valley. And that was the only place I saw western tiger. I mean, normally it's in the Umatilla National Forest, and also the two-tailed tiger, which is in the list of the other species I didn't see, which we should see. So those are the only swallowtails I saw the other day, those two. The whites, the western white was almost as common as the pale tiger swallowtail, so you can almost guarantee seeing western whites. Mostly Umatilla National Forest and a higher elevation, the Kendall Skyline Drive, but also a few in the Tucannon River Valley. And there's four conundrums. Well, in my mind, they're conundrums anyway, with the species that we'll see or we might see. They're species that confuse me and probably confuse others too. So the first one is western whites and checkered whites, because the Blue Mountains is one of the few places you could expect to find checkered whites. Most of the records we have come from the two counties, Garfield and Columbia, that we will be visiting. So, you know, I didn't go catching western whites when I was there, because I assumed they're all western whites. But the thought occurred that maybe they're not all western whites, and maybe we should look. But then the problem is, how do we tell? Because I'm certainly no expert in telling. I did, for the book Dave and I wrote years ago now, I reared checkered whites that I imported the breeding stock, and this is a female I think I reared out. So that looks quite different to me than the previous picture, but they're not all like that. And a lot of checkered whites are very much like western whites, like you see here. So it's a conundrum and a problem, and hopefully some of you will be more experienced than I am in telling them apart. But we should probably check a few just to see if we can see any differences. Cabbage white, ubiquitous, of course. Didn't see that many though. Tucannon River Valley, the only place I saw them. Julia's orange tip, I already mentioned, very common at Mount Misery and the higher elevation areas, including the Kendall Skyline Drive. We all know about Julia, used to be Sarah, but yeah, common at the higher elevations. And, you know, we wouldn't really expect to see many of those in July, even in the Blue Mountains, but you can see lots of them at the top. Sulphurs, the orange sulphur was quite, well, I can't know. None of these butterflies were common except the whites, the western whites, and the pale tigers. Sulphurs, I only saw a few, and they seem to be mostly orange sulphur, but I did see, I think, a few clouded sulphurs, which used to be Philodicea, but now Eryphile. This individual here is a very different one. I think it's the Alba form, but most of them don't look so different from orange sulphur. You know, they're more like this, which is, I think, a clouded sulphur, but it looks very much like an orange sulphur, but it doesn't have the orange in. That's one of the ways, but you can tell them apart. But some of the orange sulphurs don't have orange either. So again, I could have raised this as another conundrum, but I didn't. So moving on to coppers, and this is one of the Blue Mountain highlight species we wanted to see, and I did see one. So hopefully with this week of warmth, there will be others to join the one that I saw in the Tucannon River Valley. Normally we'd see them up at Mount Misery and Diamond Peak and places like that, but probably not this year. And I haven't seen them at the other location ever that we're going to in Umatilla National Forest. So the Tucannon River Valley might be the best chance to seeing one. And hopefully it's the Punjab area that I showed in the slide. I saw this species. So we'll have to, hope we can see this species for those of you that haven't seen one before. It's not too many locations you can find them in Washington, although they're more common now than they were like 20 years ago. But it is a common species in the Blue Mountains normally, and hopefully, fingers crossed, with the warm week, there will be more. Hair streaks, half moon hair streak, I saw at the Willow Ridge Spring, or the Willow Ridge site, whatever it's called, in the Umatilla National Forest, just one or two again. So we should see them. Again, another example of spring butterflies that wouldn't be expecting to see. But I did see a couple of Sheridan's hair streaks, but they didn't look like this. They weren't pristine at all. They were very worn. In fact, I could only tell they were green hair streaks, and I'm assuming they were Sheridan's because they were so worn, because they had a tiny bit of green sort of down at the base of the wings there. But I did find a fresher green hair streak that looked awfully like a Finis, which is the Western green hair streak. So again, this could be another conundrum. We have a lot of conundrums in Washington butterflies in separating. And normally it's habitat that separates these two, but the habitat we're in could serve as habitat for both. The Sheridans could have come up from the valley bottom, which is where you'd normally find Sheridans in valley bottoms. And since it clearly had a long life, it could have come up from the valley floor. Same place, I found brown elfins too in very poor condition. And so they've been out there for a while as well. And they look like this, both the green hair streak and the brown elfins look pretty much like this, very tattered and very, very little to show of their wings. And, and I'm sort of taking a bit of a guess as to what they were. The ubiquitous grey hair streak, I did see one or two of those at the Willow Ridge site, the only place I saw them, but I'd expect to see them everywhere. Moving on to the blues, very few blues, as I said. This one though, the Acmon blue, which I assume it's Acmon, again, it's a conundrum, and I think I do identify this as a conundrum. Yes, conundrum 2, Acmon or Lupini. These Acmons are very large and brightly colored, just like this one in the slide. This one isn't from there, but it looked identical to this. And I have a feeling that Dave may have dissected some from this location for me in the past and concluded they were Acmon. I didn't check my records, but anyway, Lupini does occur in the county, and so we have that conundrum again, and maybe it's something that only dissection can give us a 100% answer. But these are, again, well, this is a species that's not too uncommon. I found this species in all locations, I think, apart from the very top, in the valley and in mid-elevation locations as well. So we will see this species too. And dotted blue, I saw Columbiae, Euphalotes columbiae, I believe. It wasn't, I don't think it was this individual. I don't think this photograph was from then. But I also saw a couple that might have been Heracleoides. I daren't say it, but it could actually be another conundrum. But again, they're quite difficult to separate sometimes. But we will see some dotted blues, which I think mostly are going to be Columbiae. Bois d'Ivoire blue, surprisingly, I saw just one or two of these, and this is a species you'd expect to see plenty of. And the ones I did see were very fresh, like this individual here, so newly closed. So maybe just beginning to flower. I mean, it makes sense since the lupins are just beginning to flower. So hopefully we may see more of this species at the weekend. Just a couple of greenish blues as well. And this is another thing that I've seen, or I appear to see in the blues, but also at other locations, in that the phenology of species is getting overlapped. So spring species are overlapping with summer species. So, you know, species like greenish blue, which you might expect a little bit later than bois de voir, they're both flying together. So that seems to be a common feature. A lot of butterfly sites I've been to this year, where you can see not only spring and summer flowers, but you can see spring and summer butterflies flying together in the same place at the same time. So it's another feature, I think, of our wacky weather. My little crescent was one of the few butterflies flying right at the top, Mount Misery, but it was also flying in the Tucanon River Valley in higher numbers than I'd seen for, you know, in my memory at this time before. Normally would see my litter, the first generation, you know, in mid-late spring or early spring even, but July doesn't really, you know, compute as the time that you'd often see my litter in the blues. So I think this is, you know, being retarded again, but they're quite common, so we should see them. Northern checker spot, only saw one or two of these. They look fresh, so again, I think they're just beginning their flight. Normally in the Tucanon River Valley, they're quite common. And there's the snowberry checker spot, which I saw thousands of last year, and this year just a few. And some of those were looking pretty old and worn. So I think their flight may have finished or nearly finishing, but we should still see a few. And I could be wrong about that. I guess there may be a burst of new emergence with this warm weather. We will see. And there's the ventral side. And that's just one of the hundreds of shots I took last year of them in their hundreds, thousands, actually, literally, mudding at the Punjab campground area. Morning cloaks, the old generation is still flying, obviously, but they look pretty good condition because they haven't really done much flying this spring, presumably. So, yeah, almost everywhere I saw one or two of these, as you'd expect. The Milbert's tortoiseshell, I only saw old, worn individuals. So the new generation, I guess, because I saw the caterpillars, is still developing. You know, normally in July, you'd see the new generation of Milbert's tortoiseshells, but clearly they're still a few weeks away. And so we may see a few old Milberts, or maybe there's some caterpillars that are already further advanced, and who knows, we might see a fresh one. In this crazy weather year, you know, really you have to expect the unexpected. Lorquin's Admiral in Tucanon River Valley, especially the upper part, was quite common. You know, one of the most abundant butterflies I saw during my 2-day trip. Commas and angle wings, they were all old generation again. There was old satire commons, satyr commas, particularly the Punjab campground where nettles grow commonly, which is a host plant, obviously. But also saw a few hoary commas as well. So those are the two we're likely to see. Didn't see green or orris that I'll mention later on as species we might see, but I didn't see last week. Common wood nymph I saw in the Tucanon River Valley, a few of those at the upper end. It seemed like they were very fresh and had just emerged too. So we may see more of those after this warm week. Ringlets, they look pretty worn actually. So a generation is finishing, and I didn't see many of those, but you know, there was just a couple in most of the locations I went, except for the high elevation areas. And then my conundrum number 3, skippers, specifically dusky wings, specifically this potential Pecuvius dusky wing that I'm not, I'm not an expert on Pacuvias. I must admit, I haven't seen a great deal of them, but to me, this looks a bit like one, but I have trouble separating them from Perseus, which I can readily identify. But this could be Pacuvias. It does occur in one of the counties. I can't remember which one now that we're going to, probably the other one too. It just hasn't been recorded there. And hopefully Dave or someone will be able to help us with my conundrum number 3, because there are quite a few dusky wings flying around, and I didn't have time to sample a lot of them, but I did see Perseus and what appears to be this, which may actually be a female Perseus. Does look to be a female. So that's another bit of interest that we can spend time on, separating at least 2 dusky wings. I mean, they should have been what's it called? Isolus, the dusky wing. The other dusky wing should be, well, it does occur in the Blue Mountains, but I didn't see it, and I don't think I included it in my list of species that we might see, but that would be one that we could see perhaps. Okay, so moving on to the butterflies we may see because of the warmth since I scouted, and hopefully better weather during our study weekend. Fingers crossed that we have better weather. As I say, the weather around the mountains was great, but actually on the mountains was not so great. Clouds tended to build up during the day and just hang around, and brought the temperatures down to low 60s, and nothing much was doing. So hopefully that doesn't happen for us next weekend. It doesn't look like it's going to, so that's good. Okay, the two-tailed tiger swallowtail is common in most of the areas that we will be visiting, or it should be common, but I didn't see it last week, so I don't know what the story is there. The phenology is pretty much the same as the pale tiger swallowtail, so yeah, maybe we will see it this week, but I don't think we're going to see many. Nice swallowtail, we may pass the flight period of that. They're probably mostly larvae now, but you might see a few worn ones hanging on perhaps. So there's a possibility we could see. Certainly common up there, as is Indra swallowtail normally, particularly at the Willow Ridge spot. You see them on the cliff, at the cliff top, coming up the slopes in other years, but this year I didn't see any. But and again, we may have missed the spring generation perhaps, but who knows in this year? Maybe they're just very late. Also used to see them in the Chicanan River Valley too, mudding. So yeah, it could turn up anywhere. And again, maybe the warm will help that one emerge. One I was really surprised not to see was the mountain Parnassium, because in most of the mid-elevation and high elevation, probably too soon, but the mid-elevation areas like the Willow Ridge site, this should have been flying. And also the Kendall Skyline Road, it should have been in the locations up there as well. So I can only guess that it's on the verge of emerging. So hopefully we will see some freshly closed individuals of mountain Parnassians this coming weekend. It's certainly common up there, and maybe we're 2 weeks too early. Hopefully not. Hopefully it was just 1 week early. I just stuck this slide in because Kathy gave it to me or shared this some time ago, pointing out the stocking feet of the mountain Parnassian. And now I've been looking at the feet. Well, I've been putting these slides together, looking at the feet of other butterflies, and it does seem to me, actually, I hadn't really noticed before, that butterflies that have black and white antennae tend to have black and white feet too, or socks, or legs, or whatever you want to call them, tarsi. So that was an interesting observation. I don't know that it means much. John Pelham probably tell me, but anyway, that was interesting. So we can look for stocking feet too. The margin white, we should see it's quite common down the Tucannon River Valley. Just, and maybe some of the, what I thought were cabbage whites might have been margin whites. I didn't chase everyone, but, pure white butterfly. And normal, I don't know what normal is anymore, but in other years, margin whites have been common in the Tucannon River Valley. Queen Alexandra sulphur, I used to see a lot of these in Tucannon River Valley as well. And so that's a possible as well. So we should check all the sulphurs we see too. Purplish copper, one of the most common coppers, usually common in the blues as well. Didn't see any of those, which is a surprise. Maybe we missed the early generation, but I somehow doubt it. I think they should be flying now, unless the female. Blue copper we might be slightly too early for, and it could be one of these species that's just going to burst forth in a week or so. Buckwheat feeder, of course, so we could see that on the Kendall Skyline Ridge Road, but it's usually common in the Tucannon River Valley as well. And the lilac bordered copper is also another Blue Mountain special, if you like. That's the place the place that I find it to be most abundant, both in the Umatilla National Forest and Tucannon Valley. So again, this might be a species waiting to emerge, but normally it would be flying by now. I think I saw one of these fly past quickly. It looked like brown hair streak. It wasn't a brown elfin, I don't think. So I think it was this, which is thicket hair streak, which is, I can't remember where I saw it now. I think it might have actually been at Mount Misery, one of the few butterflies flying up there, whatever it was. And that is a place where I've seen them before. So that's a possibility. And it occurs mostly at that high elevation, but the Kendall Skyline Road should also have populations of it. The hedgerow hair streak, I found quite a lot in the past up at Mount Misery, but I was surprised to see when I was looking through records, it's not supposed to occur in Garfield County, which is where I've seen it. So John Pelham would be interested in that. So maybe we should go to Mount Misery just to prove that the hedgerow hair streak occurs up there. But it's probably much too early for this one up there at the moment, and it might take more than 1 week of warmth for things to emerge. Western pine elfin, I was surprised I didn't see that lower down at the Willow Ridge area. Maybe the flight had finished down there, and maybe some of the very worn hair streaks I saw might have been some of these perhaps. So it's possible. Western towel blue, usually common in the Tucannon River Valley. There's a lot of moist meadows, the upper end of the valley, where this butterfly is usually common, but didn't see any the other day. But maybe again, this is another species. So there's a lot of potential species that could burst forth, so to speak, this week with the warmth. So bring on the 100-degree day for Tri-Cities tomorrow, and maybe it'll be 80 up in the mountains. Another unique, butterfly for the Blue Mountains, and particularly on the Kendall Skyline Road, it's very common up there, the Northern Blue, later on, but usually mid-July onwards you will see this species. So we can pray that the week of warmth will start bringing this out, but it's usually slightly later, I think. But it's when it does fly, it is the commonest blue up in that area. So I hope we see a lot of locations that some of you will be interested to go back to in a couple of weeks, because if you can believe me, the butterfly fauna, if it's not very good next week, it will be in 2 or 3 weeks' time. So this is the species I was really hoping we were going to see. It's one of my favorite fritillary, whatever you want to call them. I'm still British, so I'll call them fritillary. The Great Basin fritillary, unique coloration. I think John calls it muddy. I guess that's a good way of putting it. It does look a bit muddy. There's some variation in how muddy they are, but this butterfly is common around Mount Misery and Diamond Peak. It's probably the commonest fritillary up there. You can guarantee that you will see it in a year that's normal, inverted commas. But as I say, I did see, well, I think I said that I saw a brief glimpse of what I thought was a fritillary when I was up there dodging the clouds. And if I did, then it might have been this. So it's almost worth a trip up to Mount Misery if the sun's out, just to see if the first Great Basin fritillaries have eclosed. But are we too early? I put there. But it is a beautiful species, I think. And if you haven't seen it, it's you know I'm just sad that we maybe won't get to see it this time. And that's the dorsal view of the Great Basin fritillary, and there's a lot of black on the wings. I mean, all fritillaries look the same, obviously, superficially on the upper side. You've really got to go looking very deeply to notice significant differences. But the Great Basin tends to have a lot more black on the forewing than most other species, probably a consequence of living in a cold Mount Misery type climate. But it does help distinguish them, you know, compared to, say, the Zerini, where you can see the amount of black on the forewing is much less. And most other fritillaries are sort of like this in the amount of black markings they have. Zerini, we should see, you know, at any of the locations in the Blue Mountains in most years, or in all years, this year too, later on. But it should be flying now, and maybe it will appear this week. And that's the underside. The Great Spangle Fritillary used to be one of the great places I knew for Great Spangle Fritillary was Tucannon River Valley, particularly a place called Cummins Creek, where regularly you'd find it. It wasn't there last week, so I don't know if it will be there next week, but we can only hope. And yeah, that slide there, I think Dave took that slide, so I don't remember taking that picture myself. The unique female of the species, which is a gorgeous butterfly. Be nice to see one of those, but somehow I don't think we will, but I could be wrong. And the Northwestern Fritillary, this is another species that it's easy to find at the upper reaches of the Blue Mountains, Mount Misery and Diamond Peak. It's almost as common up there as the Great Basin. And so actually a lot of the time you're separating the Northwestern Fritillary, Hesperus, from the Great Basin Fritillary. And you can see it's more orange reddish. It hasn't got the muddy coloration at all. So they're not difficult to separate, really. There's some variation though. This is Hesperus again. This is a female, but there's certain characters that give it away. And this is, you know, one of the good places to find Hesperus fritillaries. And again, they should be flying, and maybe they'll come out this week. But you know, I'm not as confident about that as some of the lower elevation species that we should see. And this is an interesting side story, and a story that no one else believes except me. I think Atlantis fritillary also occurs in the Blue Mountains. This individual was from the Blue Mountains. And well, actually, this one was from Wallowa County, so which isn't very far as the crow flies from where we will be going at the weekend. But I've also found individuals very similar to this in Mount Misery and Diamond Peak. And to me, that looks very much like an Atlantis fritillary. But John and Bob, although Bob originally thought it was Atlantis, but then he backtracked and it became a variation of Hesperus. But I'm not convinced. And actually the upper side is as telling to me as the lower side. The upper side of Atlantis always has this very broad black margin. And the individuals I have seen in the Blue Mountains have this broad black margin. I'm not aware of any other species that has it, unless there's extreme variation in some other species individuals. But anyway, it's an ongoing mystery to me, and I've been up there a number of years in recent times to try and find them again, and I haven't been able to find them. I've just found lots of Hesperus, but I know what I saw at the time, and so I'm hoping I can come across them one day. I don't think it's going to be this weekend, given the prognosis of the weather and everything else, but it would have been good if there'd been a normal season, because then many eyes may have found the elusive Atlantis, if the missing Atlantis. I think we've heard that somewhere before. Okay, Hydaspes fritillary, that's one that is also common, not only at Mount Misery and Diamond Peak, but most other locations, lower elevation as well. And obviously this is one you'll all be familiar with from other places in Washington. But I didn't see that last week. So again, that could be one that's on the verge of appearing at lower elevations, and one that we could well see this coming weekend. The Mormon fritillary is also fairly common in the blues, and I think it's this form, which is Erina. It's a subspecies, but it's been so long ago that I've seen them up there. So they're slightly different ventrally than Washingtonia, which is the other subspecies that occurs in the Cascades. And this species could be on the Kendall Skyline Drive by next week, because it's usually one of the early emergers. So we might see this subspecies of the Mormon fritillary, fingers crossed. Western meadow fritillary is in the same category. Thank Dave for this picture. I couldn't find one going through my slides, putting this presentation together. I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be finding things. Anyway, the Western meadow fritillary, that should be flying now. It should have been flying from the beginning of July, actually end of June. This is one, hopefully the warm weather will bring out this coming week. But this is another conundrum. Well, not really a conundrum, but it's something to watch out for, because there's a related species, or a very similar species, called the meadow fritillary, that is allegedly occurs in the Blue Mountains too, but it hasn't been seen for like 50 years. And so I'm always on the lookout for it. And so if we see any meadow fritillaries, we should check that they are actually meadow fritillaries. And one of the best features I find for distinguishing them is this distinct submedian band, this yellowish band that's on the ventral wing, which in the meadow fritillary, Beloria bellona, this is it, is more suffused. You can see it a bit there, but it sort of blends in more to the rest of the color of the butterfly. It's not as distinct. So it's not a very, very significant difference, but it is a difference that we can look for if we were lucky enough to actually find some Western meadow fritillaries, in case the elusive meadow fritillary does still exist in the Blue Mountains. It may have long since gone, of course, but we need to keep looking out for it. And that's the upper side. So I don't think there's much difference between the upper surfaces of both. Well, I'm not sure if that's Dave's picture again. I don't know if the darker coloration of the black is significant or not. But anyway, that's another conundrum we can think about when we're up there if we happen to see Western meadow fritillaries. Crescents, I saw the Mylitta crescent, as I said, but no other crescents. We should see meadow crescents. They should be flying now. And this could be another species that the warmth will bring out in the valley and also on the Skyline Drive. And the northern crescent's also common in the Tucannon River Valley too. So this is another one that may appear in this coming week. Angle wings. So this is, the Blue Mountains was a place I used to go to specifically to find Aureus anglewing, the elusive Aureus, which doesn't occur in too many locations in Washington, but you can tell it, particularly this subspecies, by the very black underside in the basal part of the wings. So it stands out in real life very much. And the Tucannon River Valley used to be a great place for it, particularly the Punjab camping ground area. But of course now, in a normal year, this would be very worn. These butterflies would be worn and near death. But in this strange year, maybe not. So we should check all angle wings that you see in the Tucannon River Valley, just in case there is an Aureus lurking there somewhere. Also, green angle wings occur there. This isn't a very good slide. The only one I could find doesn't show the green very well on the lower the ventral wing. But this time of year, this is what you might see with a worn, overwintered individual. The green wouldn't be showing very much. So we should be watching out for those. So if you see an angle wing, don't just assume it's satire or hoary. It could be one of these other two. California tortoiseshell, I was really surprised not to see one of those last week. There should be a mass emergence by now, or in July, early July. Normally occurs a spring generation is built up to produce adults in early July. Maybe that will happen this week. Lots going to happen this week, apparently. But this picture was taken at the Punjab horse dung area I mentioned earlier, many years ago now. But I'm not sure we're going to see a site like that, but maybe we'll see one or two freshly emerged California tortoiseshells with a bit of luck, because they are around Washington generally in other locations. So it's a bit of a surprise not to see one last week. Wasn't surprised I didn't see this one, but I have seen this in the Tucannon River Valley, specifically at Meadow Creek, which is right at the end, where possibly we'll have lunch. Compton's tortoiseshell, which is more common or more readily seen in the northern part of the state. I did see a few of these, must be 15, maybe nearly 20 years ago now. Very exciting, but I only ever saw one or two in a single day in a single location, so they're not very common, but just to be aware, it's a possibility. Who knows? Painted lady, another ubiquitous butterfly you can see throughout the world, of course, but you can't see it in the Blue Mountains right now unless there's been an emergence this week. The migration this year from the south doesn't appear to have been very strong. I'm not aware of too many reports of painted ladies in Washington at all, actually, thinking about it. I think we see more monarchs in Washington than we have painted ladies. Not that I go tracking painted ladies, but just, by the by, I don't think I know of any reports. So maybe you can tell me if anyone's seen one later on. But anyway, they can turn up anywhere, anytime. So it's always a possibility, as is this one, the West Coast lady with the distinguishing orange spot instead of the white spot, as in the painted lady. This is often quite common in the Blue Mountains, particularly Mount Misery and Diamond Peak. We'd often, in the old days, 20 years ago now, we see them migrating from Oregon into Washington, up to Diamond Peak and across, sometimes hundreds of them. But that's a long time ago. But again, it's a butterfly that can turn up at any time, and maybe they're migrating as we speak. Not a very good picture, but I took this last year at Punjab. So in the Tucannon River Valley, Butler's Alpine, and that is, for 20 years has been a good spot to find them in the lush grassy areas near the river. I can't work out whether they've already emerged and gone or they haven't emerged yet. I mean, anybody's guess. I think they should have emerged and finished. But normally I think they emerge early June in this location. So if that's 3 weeks late, that's still, you know, I would have expected to have seen one last week, but I didn't. So I'm a bit puzzled. But so we should keep our eyes open for these. Walk through the grassy areas because they'll fly up when you walk through. So it's definitely a possibility. So very few skippers I saw last week, as you heard, and you know, Blue Mountains isn't a brilliant place for skippers, I don't think, but we should see the Western branded skipper appearing very soon, I would have thought. I was surprised I didn't see any worn tubers, to be honest, but I didn't. And common checkered skipper, again, can turn up anywhere, but used to be common in the Tucannon River Valley. I should have seen it last week, but didn't. Roadside skipper never was common, but I have found it in the Tucannon River Valley on a number of occasions. Silver spotted skipper used to be quite common around the fishing lake that I pointed out right at the beginning might be our first stop, which was exciting to me because on the east side, not too many places you can find this skipper, but that was one of them. And I looked in vain last week. It wasn't there then, but dare I say it, a week might make a difference. Oh, and finally, really stretching things here, but 15 years ago, I thought I saw a Yuma skipper along the Tucannon River Valley Road. And Phragmites, the host plant, the host reed for this species does occur there. So it is a possibility, and it was certainly a large skipper, unmarked, and I can't think what else it could be. I didn't have a camera, so I couldn't prove it. So it, you know, and I haven't been back many times since, really looking for it, not at the right time. So this is, you know, if you see a skipper, we should really, you know, catch it and check that what it is. Okay, well, thank you for listening to me, and I'll answer any questions you might have. I didn't include all possible species. I ran out of enthusiasm after a while because so many possibilities of things that we could see. But in this crazy weather year, you know, things like pine whites and woodland skippers could appear earlier. You know, as I said, there's a mixing of summer and spring butterflies, and normally pine whites, even in the River Valley, wouldn't occur to the end of July. But, you know, in this crazy year, and same with woodland skippers, they might appear early, who knows? And I mentioned the rare migrants, but others like the American lady or dainty sulphurs could appear as well. So as we always do, just keep our eyes peeled and enjoy the weekend. Thank you very much for listening. And any questions? I've answered all your questions. Great.
Jim Reed, you need to unmute. He was talking and nothing was coming
I've
out.
been unmuted.
Hi, Jim.
Thank you, David, for giving us a hint there. It would be really nice if we did see everything on your list. Yeah, that would be a great weekend.
It would, wouldn't it? I don't think we're going to, but you know, if we
Yeah.
see 30, if I saw 30, then I think with the weather and with our extra eyes, we're going to see 35. We have to, and maybe pushing upper 30s near 40. You know, especially if we get to Mount Misery on Sunday, I think we can get to 40. It's just the numbers of everything are low. You know, you have to chase after everyone you see because that might be the last time you see it.
Right. Well, hopefully we'll have lots of folks up there that are pretty good at this.
Enthusiastic people is what we want.
I do have a question. Have we, or I guess have you, David, decided yet what time you want people to meet on Saturday morning?
8:30, I thought was a good time. Is that all right?
Yep.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Are we going to meet at the Best Western there and Dayton. They've made their parking lot, and it's a big parking lot, quite available to us to kind of muster there.
Yeah, I think that worked well.
Yeah,
I'd
I think
say-
that was the plan. We just didn't have a time.
Right. Yeah, 8:30 is fine.
Well done, David. That was really, really a great presentation, and they did a nice job of scouting.
Thanks, Dave. It wasn't easy, as you know. You think it's going to be easy, but it's not easy. It's yeah.
No, it's not.
Well, your scouting trip was a lot more productive than mine when I went in late March there, and I saw one Sheridan's green hair streak, I think. And that was,
Well, that was
at,
before the cold.
Falls.
That was before the freeze killed everything, probably.
Yeah,
David, I'm curious about your camera. Some of those pictures were remarkable. You could see all the scales. And so I was able to see that some butterflies had larger scales than others. It was just remarkable to me.
Yeah, but all those pictures were a variety of cameras. I can't say which camera it was.
Wow. Yeah,
You know,
great. great photos.
yeah, I had to go through all my files looking back years and years. So a lot of the pictures are in the book, of course, you might have recognized. So that was my very good camera that was very good at the time. I guess it still is, but Canon, can't even remember what it's called anymore. Dave would remember. He remembers these things more than I do. But you know, the field camera I have now is a Nikon P1000.
That's right. About that. Yes.
And that's pretty good. It's not quite as good as as a Canon, but you know, the really heavy camera, but it's light. And I got it mostly because it's got an incredible zoom. I mean, you know, they advertise it saying you can zoom into the space station. I've seen the pictures to prove it. So I got the zoom for monarch butterflies to look at the tags, you know, in the overwintering sites. But it does a good job of zooming into butterflies when you're a long way away. So it's a pretty good camera.
Nice.
Is there a plan for a trip around the Tri-Cities on Monday?
there's a distinct possibility. I was gonna go check it out on my way there. In the past, I've gone to see viceroys right there where the Columbia and the Yakima rivers merge. There's kind of a woodland there, and quite often the viceroys are there. I will let everybody know if I see any when we get there.
And if you go to Leslie Groves Park in Richland, you can see monarch butterflies. There's 3 monarchs flying around that park, or more, maybe.
Wow.
I keep getting reports from the place, different people seeing them there.
Which park is that, David?
Leslie Groves Park.
Yes, yes.
Also, Umatilla, McNairy Dam. There's a couple flying around there as well.
Good.
Very good.
And actually at McNairy Dam, viceroys often there too. But I haven't been for a few weeks, I don't know. No more questions?
Just excitement.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, well, the weather's looking good, so it should be a good weekend.
Well, I'm excited. I've been doing this for several years, and I've got 5 of them on my list that I'm gonna hold you personally responsible for.
Yeah, no, I should have put a disclaimer at the end, shouldn't I? Those 5 weren't in the 30 that I saw, were they? The 30 I didn't see.
Actually, only one of them.
Yeah, Edith's Copper.
It's, no, I've seen Edith Copper up on, no, shoot, up in the White Pass area. We go up there for field trips all the time. No, I'm excited to see the Great Basin trip. I have not ever seen it.
Yeah, well, I didn't see that last week. That was one I didn't see.
Oh,
I saw a fleet in Fertility that might have been it, but I had no way of knowing I did or not.
okay.
So, yeah. No
So did you-
guarantee. Hi, Connie.
I'm doing. Sorry, I had to mow, so I'm late. But was it coolish when you were there?
Yeah, it was in the 60s. It was all in the 60s.
Oh, that's
It
that
won't-
bank. That's that bank of clouds we were watching up in the mountains while we were clear here the whole time. Then.
Right, but even when the sun came out, it was still upper 60s, maybe 72 was the
Oh.
maximum. But,
Wow.
yeah, it'll be warmer than that this coming weekend, though.
Well, now it's a heat wave, right? We've
Right.
got 2 days of intense heat, so all
Yeah.
kinds of things will hatch out for us. Be closed. Sorry. Good. Thank you. Yay.
So again, for the conference or for the weekend, we're going to be meeting at the campground at, was it 6 PM on Friday? Is that right?
7
7 p.m.
7 PM at Lewis and Clark Trails, State Park.
Yeah, bring a chair.
Do bring your own chair.
It's about 5 miles west of town, right?
Yeah, 5 to 6 miles west of town.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Thank you.
And Dave, are you
Yay.
bringing your species, your cool species list?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah, are you bringing your cool species list?
Yeah, it's the old species list. You saw a lot of names on Dave's presentation that were not going to be on that list. As you know, a lot of the genera have been changed. But it's a statewide list, and I've got a bunch of them printed up.
Okay. And it's a great list. I know it's. Go ahead and change the names just to keep us all honest, but. Or confused.
All right.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
Okay, Cheryl, I was gonna ask you before we all go running away. I have a field trip at Slate Peak in a couple of weeks. And
I haven't.
Adams and Mount Hood are awful white.
I haven't been up there yet. A friend of mine is in the guard station up there, or the ranger station, and they just were able to get up there this weekend. So the snow is still covering a lot of the trails, and you have to walk the road to get to the peak. You can't drive to it yet.
Right.
So it might be the typical a couple weeks later than normal up there too. So if I get up there after the study weekend, I'll let you know what I'm seeing.
Okay, I might delay it.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of seems like it's the trend this year.
the trend. Okay,
Well, I have to say, as a skier, we did most of our skiing in March and April this year. It was so late. We had a really low snow year and then it just came on and we were skiing hard in April, May. I mean, it was a La Nina year. That's happened before. So I have somebody who just came down from the Pickets, which is in the North Cascades, and I'll get a snow report from him tonight. Might give us a clue.
yes. All right, well, before everybody runs away, David, thank you once again. You do such a wonderful job of getting this all ready. I don't know what we'd do without you and Dave
Good.
Squared.
Looking forward to the weekend and seeing you all.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good night. Thank
Good
you,
night.
David.
thanks.